The night is all darkness, there is no moon, only an immense vault full of stars. The eyes never finish inspecting the entire night sky, as if we want to find something unique in that swarm of lights. At some point we ask ourselves how the universe was created. Also, who created the universe? These two questions that we never ask are two opposite positions, even when they talk about the universe and its creation. The first implies that the universe created itself, and the second grants us that there must have been a creator. By simple inspection, we have to conclude that the universe could not have created itself, because it is logical that where we started from, a big explosion, it could not have just generated as something magical. We discard what our knowledge of the centuries has taught us. In our experience, an explosion comes from explosive matter, a detonator and a cause. The big explosion must have had matter to explode, a detonator, and a cause that ultimately produced the detonation. In trying to give us an answer to the second question asked, who could have created the universe? This brings us to a familiar position where science rejects the view of an all-powerful being whom we call God. But there is no need to conclude with a creator at the outset because we must first conclude with our logical reasoning and determine the steps necessary for the creation of the universe. To begin with a creation, we must consider what would be the first step in that process. At this point, it will take us to the point where our universe will begin. As stated above, the explosion known as the Big Bang must have had matter from which the explosion originated. Therefore, our logical reasoning forces us to admit that there must have been matter before the detonation. But we know nothing about this matter that we will call primitive matter. We do not know about its possible composition, a probable chemical bond, or if it exists. Furthermore, if this matter has a structure of a universe or not, what would be its form, configuration, limits, or if it is limitless. The explosion of the Big Bang stops us because it puts before us an almost insurmountable barrier since our knowledge is acquired in our current cosmos, which we know is made of matter in various forms, and is limited to 3 visible dimensions and a 4th dimension that is only speculated. However, scientific currents assume that the universe was created from nothing. Likewise, others with religious opinions agree that God created the universe from nothing. The case that says God created the universe from nothing is a theological error. Scientists assume the universe is a product of nothing. This is due to their reductionist position, given the expansion of the cosmos. So, the first step is to understand that this universe could not have come from nothing, or from a magical idea of a powerful God, who at the last moment made appear what should have been the detonating matter. In other words, a spontaneous appearance and then an inexplicable explosion. The first step is an existential necessity, because if that primitive matter or primitive universe is not granted existence, we would be speculating and drawing conclusions about something that does not exist, elaborating theories in a vacuum. Our logical reasoning must lead us to conclude that this universe full of stars, which is immense and almost infinite, cannot come from something small and reduced by a reasonable and perhaps logical conclusion, but not certain. Nor can we accept a spontaneous appearance of explosive matter, and then the explosion, or simply the explosion, occurred to inflate our ignorance and superstition. In this 21st century, it is impossible to accept magical explosions and explosions from nowhere or other causes without common sense. There is a logical, philosophical reasoning that leads us to conclude that this universe is not the product of magic, nor of nothing, and that something before the explosion must have existed, which we have called a primitive universe, an unknown orbis. Once we have concluded that this existential need has generated as a result an authentic existence, a rational and logical conclusion, that there is neither magic nor reductionism to forge an inexplicable explosion, then there must have been an unknown universe that is impossible to configure in our minds given our current patterns of knowledge. Therefore, we find that, given the concepts born from previous existence, We find ourselves in need of discovering the dimensions that make up our current reality of three visible dimensions. That is, we have a dimensional need, because in this cosmos, its three dimensions are visible, and we speculate in a fourth dimension, we must find how these surfaces have been formed to configure our world around us. This dimensional need comes as a result of our ignorance about that ancient primitive universe. Because not knowing what that possible cosmos was like and if it was a verifiable cosmos, we are forced to accept that our present dimensional concept could not have been equal or similar to that primitive universe, because then the Big Bang was not the beginning of this universe. This would again lead us to illogical and superstitious answers, and would also lead us to an infinite vicious circle. Therefore, when we conclude that there was a primitive universe before the Big Bang, real and existing, we have to find how the formation of dimensions could have occurred: length, width, height. The formation of three dimensions is necessary because our reality is framed in length, width, and height. Although there are theories of multiple dimensions, we can only accept a fourth dimension. When considering that the previous cosmos or primitive universe must have been composed of primitive matter, we must assume that this matter was not equal or similar to the present matter. This forces us to imagine that this ancient matter must have contained the three dimensions, a fourth dimension, gravity, electromagnetic force, nuclear phenomena, and above all, time, all in an amalgam that is impossible to imagine in its structural and union form. This must force us to conclude that there was a previous universe with primitive matter and there is a current universe with knowable matter, but that must have been different from the old matter. The concept of the Big Bang has been the moment of transformation of the previous cosmos into a current universe. The Big Bang is the turning point of a universal reality that must be transformed every certain existential period. The above becomes a universal necessity that is transformed, at least, into two different realities of existence. The universe is not infinite when it must have had a beginning in the Big Bang. So, without fear of being wrong, we can say that matter is eternal or infinite, either as primitive matter or as current matter. The same can be concluded about time because by distorting the magical, spontaneous appearance of explosive matter, we are forced to say that time is eternal, although time does not refer to the rotation or translation of the Earth. Now, when we realize that universal necessity where all our patterns of knowledge are found in their primitive form in that primitive orbis, and the universe not being infinite, that universal reality must be within something, and we cannot know it. However, we can assume it. Universal reality is found within a container that is not infinite but is greater than our universal reality. That container that our universal reality must have had, we concluded its existence because we had to assume that all the factors in our current matter were united and accessible when the explosion occurred, and then began the development of this universe of ours full of lights. We can call this container a space region. This region is where our current galaxies develop, evolve, and are sustained in that space. In addition, this region must have been where the primitive universe has remained for an unknown period. However, not knowing anything about this place, especially its patterns of knowledge, we can also assure you that it is almost infinite because it sustains our universal reality. The space region, it was said, is not infinite. Therefore, this region must be within an infinite universe. Our diligence compels us to seek the answers to the possibility of many universes, all within a superspace, hyperspace. We know that the explosion that occurred in the Big Bang came from primitive matter. Now, what produced the explosion? We cannot assume that the primitive matter self-exploded because we have assumed that said matter was inert because it must have been different from the current matter which we know has different reactions under certain conditions and factors. The self-explosion does not fit into our analysis of this 21st century. We must look for a cause, a reasonable answer with the help of our current knowledge patterns. Even if we could conjecture a self-explosion, we would always have to ask ourselves how it happened, why, and the purpose. The purpose is necessary because this universe enjoys such beauty and harmony, that a detonation as a capricious chance of the primitive universe is impossible. The observable universe is a harmony and synchronicity in movements. The phenomena that occur in the visible universe are fantastic, and the enigmas are many and leave us absorbed. When we see more within our reach, when we see the microscopic world and look at the tiny life, then we observe ourselves, and we are a wonderful work of biological engineering that leaves us stunned and with our mouths open. We cannot ignore that there is intelligence in everything, in the universe itself, and the life of this planet. Therefore, we must assume that the big explosion must have been caused by intelligence that led primitive matter to reach a point that would necessarily generate an explosion. The universe is intelligent if we assume that its design works intelligently, but the observable intelligence is found in this present cosmos, and it is here where we assume its intelligence, but we cannot assume it in the previous universe, because we do not know everything about that previous nimbus. We can only say that the detonation must have been due to an intelligent cause. But how does the explosion result in harmony and synchronicity? How can the current universe allow the development of life? These questions also force us to assume that the intelligent cause is also wise. Because an explosion like the Big Bang, the explosion alone does not provide answers to the wonders of this cosmos, nor to biodiversity, much less to the complexity of human biological engineering. The cause that produced the explosion necessarily forces us to imagine it as wise and intelligent, but also infinite, because it has been assumed that the primitive matter must have been eternal, because it is impossible to determine a period of existence of the primitive universe, and which must have been ready for the explosion, and the cause together with the previous ether. All of the above, from the moment of need to understand the existence of an ancient universe, following the needs mentioned above. In addition, we find a cause that must have been intelligent and wise. We are again forced to look for an ontological necessity. Because the explosion has not been meaningless, it has not come from chance, because the movements in the universe are harmonic, and everything in the cosmos is designed to work as it does. The explosion has been generated by factors that must have been known by the intelligent and wise cause. Based on our current patterns of knowledge, to produce an explosion, it is necessary to establish the how and the results. But we have said that the universe is harmonic in every sense, so we can infer that the wise cause must have known the how and the results. Galaxies seem to work equally or similarly, so the how must have known the factors before the detonation. At the same time, the cause must have known the result of the detonation caused by the known factors. According to our current knowledge, the explosion must have been caused by a force exerted on the previous ether, but the force must have had a certain value and differential for the detonation to generate the present universe. Therefore, the original cause of the Big Bang knew the value of the force and its differential due to its intelligence. But the results could only have come through the wisdom of that cause. Therefore, ontological necessity is leading us to establish that the transformation from a primitive universe to a current universe has been through a power to make primitive matter explode, but under known factors of a force with a value and differential to generate the present cosmos. Now, when we have assigned that primitive universe, that previous ether and infinite existence, towards minus infinite, and during that period it has not been able to explode until an intelligent and wise cause has made it explode to transform it into a cosmos full of lights and wonders. Then that ontological cause must have had a purpose to generate the force and its differential to create this universe. But what purpose could it have had? We cannot know exactly. We can suppose it is almost impossible. Also, we can imagine, conjecture, or believe what is before our eyes. When we see the universe as a whole, celestial bodies and life on the planet, everything is full of intelligence and wisdom. However, when we observe our civilization and all its achievements, we realize that the builder of civilization is that same wisdom, but through the human being. Human activity has created the most beautiful works of art in architecture, sculpture, painting, poetry, theater, novels, engineering, equally in the sciences of all kinds. But in the animal world there is no civilized development as there is in the civilization created by the same human being. So with great caution we can assume that man creates an advanced civilization. But creating an entire advanced civilization without limits would not make sense either, because we would be in the same question of why explode an ancient ether when we have assumed that there is no reason for the Big Bang. Because the explosion itself forces us to look for answers, the same search leads us to the previous conclusions. The conclusions have led us to determine that in the creation of this universe, there has been neither magic nor innocent or superstitious answers. In addition, a primitive universe has exploded because it felt like it. This is not possible in our analysis in this 21st century. We have only come to conclude that an explosion can only come from a cause that makes it explode. The purpose of creation is man himself because he seems to be the last in that chain of intelligence and wisdom. However, the human being dies and his body degrades until it is incorporated into the earth itself. Again, we are returning to the questions that leave us absorbed. What is the point of the human being appearing, creating a civilization, and then dying? This makes no sense. However, if humans had intelligence and wisdom to create the fabulous current civilization, the creative power of the universe possessed intelligence and wisdom. In addition, it was eternal and infinite. Therefore, the intelligence and wisdom of the human being have not died, but only the matter has deteriorated. The gift that the human being received to create the present society of the planet must have returned to its origin, to that creative cause of the universe, or it continues on this earth, but without a material body. The proposed ontological cause fits perfectly with what we have learned throughout history, as well as with the evolutionary process of knowledge. The same knowledge has also taught us that there must be a creator of the universe. We usually call this creator God. Now we can safely assume that an almighty God has created this universe, but he has not created it from nothing, but from a primitive universe, and knowing how and the results of exerting a certain force and a differential, so this universe works as it does. In addition, the human being has received intelligence and wisdom as a gift, and when the human dies, his intelligence and wisdom will continue to live, because it comes from that Almighty God who is eternal and infinite. To simplify that intelligence and wisdom of the human being, man and woman, let us call it the Spirit. This description of the creation of the universe is simplified from two books by the same author, The Universe and the Two Chaos and the True Time. Peace and love for all. Ricardo del Salvador.